You were taught that kindness means saying yes, that being liked means being easy, that love is something you earn by being agreeable. No one warned you. People don't respect what's always available. They respect what they have to earn. When your time, your energy, and your presence are always up for grabs, you don't become loved, you become used. And most of the time, you don't even notice it, because it starts small. Your friend calls, and you cancel your own plans. Again, your boss adds one more task at 6 p.m., and you smile and say, sure. Someone flirts with you just enough to keep you hoping, and you hold space for them, even when they disappear for days. Each time, a little part of you says, I'm not okay with this. But you silence it, because saying no feels like a risk, a loss, a rejection of who you think you're supposed to be. Carl Jung said, the most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. And part of accepting yourself is accepting your limits. It's saying, no, I can't talk right now. I need rest. No, I'm not available this weekend. I already made time for me. No, I'm not comfortable with how I'm being spoken to. No, I'm not going to stay silent to keep things easy for you. Simple words, heavy impact, because when you say them calmly and clearly, you stop being a mirror for other people's needs and start becoming a boundary they have to navigate. Here's the truth most avoid. Until you're willing to risk being disliked, you'll never be fully respected, because people don't just listen to what you say, they listen to what you allow. And when you always say yes, they assume you don't have a no, which means they'll never believe your yes either. That's when you become background noise, helpful, polite, and easy to ignore. But the moment you say no and hold it, you become real. Your presence starts to carry weight. Your absence starts to matter. You stop being an option. You become a person. This isn't about being rude. It's about being rooted. In this video, we're going to break down how boundaries reshape relationships, not by controlling others, but by clarifying you. Because people only start respecting your presence when they know what it costs to have it. You're not afraid of saying no. You're afraid of what happens after. The silence, the sigh, the change in someone's tone, the feeling that you've let someone down, and now they see you differently. That's the fear, not the word, but the rejection it might cost you. Carl Jung said, the greatest burden a child must bear is the unlived life of the parents. And for many of us, that burden becomes a script. Be helpful, be agreeable, be easy to love. Don't rock the boat, because somewhere early on, you learned that acceptance is conditional, and the price of connection is compliance. So you become a master of emotional compromise. You say yes when you want to say no. You apologize just to smooth things over. You let people cross lines because calling it out feels dramatic. And what does the world do in return? It praises you. You're so nice. You're so reliable. You're so patient. But under the compliments, you're exhausted because none of it feels real. You're liked, not for your truth, but for how much of it you've hidden. This isn't kindness. It's self-abandonment dressed as empathy. And eventually, something breaks. Because every yes that wasn't honest starts to pile up. It becomes resentment. It becomes burnout. It becomes a deep, quiet grief for the person you could have been if you weren't always trying to make others comfortable. But here's the truth no one tells you. People-pleasing is just fear in a costume. It's the fear of not being needed, not being chosen, not being loved. And when that fear runs your life, you don't build relationships. You build cages, ones where everyone's needs matter, except your own. So how do you break out? You learn to tolerate the discomfort of disappointing others. You realize that someone being upset with you doesn't mean you've done something wrong. It means you've done something real. And real connection? It doesn't demand your silence. It doesn't collapse when you draw a line. It doesn't vanish when you say, I need space. You don't lose people by being honest. You lose the illusion of safety you built by pretending. And that's not a loss. That's freedom. When you start saying no, the people around you don't just notice, they adjust. Because for the first time, they're not interacting with your fear of being disliked. They're interacting with your clarity. And clarity changes everything. Your coworker asks, "Can you take this on?" You say, "No, my plate's full." Suddenly, they realize you're not the fallback anymore. Your friend texts, "Can you talk?" You reply, "Not tonight. I need some space." And now, they realize your availability isn't infinite. Your partner asks, "Why are you being distant?" And you respond, "Because I'm tired of pretending I'm okay when I'm not." And for the first time, your needs enter the room. These aren't confrontations, they're calibrations. Your no is the reset button, the moment you stop being convenient and start being real. Carl Jung wrote, "You meet your destiny on the road you take to avoid it." And many of us avoid conflict for so long that the avoidance becomes a destiny we didn't choose. We wake up one day in friendships we resent, jobs that drain us, relationships that no longer reflect us, and wonder, how did I get here? The answer? You said yes too many times when you should have said no. You kept trying to keep the peace until there was none left inside you. But the second you reclaim that two-letter word, everything starts to shift. Yes, some people will leave, the ones who fed on your passivity, the ones who only showed up for the easy version of you. Let them, because they weren't building with you, they were benefiting from you. And the ones who stay, they'll start asking, they'll start listening, they'll start treating your boundaries not like walls, but like instructions for how to love you better. No creates friction, but it also creates respect. Think about it. You've probably had more respect for the boss who told you not now than the one who let everything slide. You probably trusted the friend who said, "I can't talk tonight, but I care," more than the one who just ghosted you to avoid discomfort. It's not the rejection that hurts, it's the dishonesty. And when you say no with honesty, with presence, with softness but strength, you give others permission to be honest too. That's how relationships mature. They stop being games of sacrifice and expectation and start becoming partnerships of truth. Boundaries aren't walls, they're doors. And not everyone gets a key, not because you're harsh, but because you finally know your value. If something in this feels familiar, if you're tired of being agreeable just to feel acceptable, then it's time. Time to reclaim your no. Time to rebuild your presence. Time to stop being respected only when you're gone and start being respected because you're whole. Hit subscribe. If you're done performing, if you're ready to speak, to stand, to say, "This is who I am, and that is enough." You're not here to be easy, you're here to be real. There's a moment that happens after you start saying no. A strange silence, not around you, but inside you. The noise of overthinking fades. The urge to explain yourself shrinks. And for the first time in a long time, you feel like you can breathe, not because you've become distant, but because you've finally become defined. And to some, that clarity will look like coldness. They'll say, "You've changed. You're selfish now. You're not who you used to be." But what they really mean is, you're not as easy to control anymore. Carl Jung wrote, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." And for years, maybe that unconscious script ran your life. Be nice, be useful, be liked. Now you're flipping the script. Be clear, be calm, be whole. Power, real power, isn't volume, it's boundaries, it's eye contact, it's the ability to walk away without needing to be understood. When you no longer need to be the good one, you stop attracting people who only show up for what they can take. Instead, you attract people who stay because of what they can build. It's not about pushing people away. It's about filtering out the ones who were only there because they thought you wouldn't. And suddenly, the friend who always interrupted you now listens. The partner who dismissed your emotions starts asking what you need. The boss who dumped work on you starts checking your limits first, not because they've changed, but because you have. You taught them how to treat you by showing them how you treat yourself. This isn't arrogance, it's integrity. You're not hard to love, you're hard to manipulate, and that's a good thing. People will misunderstand your clarity. Let them. They're not used to people who aren't performative. They're not used to kindness without self-abandonment. You don't need to yell. You don't need to justify. You don't need to match energy. You just need to stay rooted in your own. Because when you're no longer afraid to lose people, they finally have something real to lose too. You. At first, it feels like a defense, saying no, drawing a line, holding space for yourself. But the deeper truth is this: every time you say no to what drains you, you're saying yes to who you are. And that yes, that's not permission, that's dignity. Because somewhere along the way, you were taught that your worth came from how useful you were to others, how much you could take on, how little space you took up, how often you could silence yourself without making anyone uncomfortable. You were praised for being easy, for being so patient, for not needing much. But what no one asked was, what did it cost you to be that agreeable? Carl Jung said, the most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely, and part of accepting yourself completely is allowing your no to carry the same weight as your yes, because self-worth doesn't scream, it doesn't demand, it doesn't perform, it just stands. It speaks in short, clear sentences like, no, I don't have the energy for that right now. No, I'm not available for that kind of conversation. No, I'm not willing to continue being treated this way. Not with anger, not with shame, with self-respect, because no isn't rejection, it's recognition of what you deserve. And as you step into that truth, people will react. Some will respect you more, some will leave, some will test the fence just to see if it's real. That's normal, that's expected, because the version of you they were closest to, the one who said yes even when it hurt, that version served them. But it didn't serve you, and now you're serving yourself. It won't always feel good. Sometimes it'll feel lonely. Sometimes you'll miss how simple things were when you were silent. But simple was never the goal. Sovereignty is, and sovereignty doesn't need to be loud. It needs to be consistent. So the next time you feel guilty for drawing a boundary, remember, you're not being mean. You're being real. You're not pushing people away. You're giving the right ones a way to come closer. The right way. You are not too much. You are no longer willing to be less. It doesn't start with fireworks. It starts with silence. A silence that doesn't feel empty, but clear. The day you say no and don't explain it. The moment someone crosses your boundary and instead of shrinking, you pause, breathe, and stand still. You don't yell. You don't justify. You don't beg to be understood. You finally stopped asking for permission to exist. Carl Jung wrote, wholeness is not achieved by cutting off a portion of one's being, but by integration. And this is what integration looks like. Bringing back every part of you that was sacrificed in the name of being easy, nice, or low maintenance. You remember the girl who dimmed her light so her friends wouldn't feel insecure. The boy who stayed silent so he wouldn't be labeled too emotional. The adult who worked late, apologized too much, and smiled when they were breaking. You don't shame those versions. You thank them because they helped you survive. But now, you're not surviving anymore. You're returning. Not to the past, but to the part of you that never left, only waited for you to stop abandoning it. And with every no that comes from peace instead of panic, you reclaim that part. You start waking up differently, You walk into rooms without scanning for approval. You say, "I'm not available for that," without a knot in your chest. You stop proving your worth in conversations where you were never meant to compete. Because now, you know, your boundaries aren't weapons, they're mirrors, and anyone who can't look at them was never seeing you to begin with. People might still leave, some will, but you'll let them, not with bitterness, but with gratitude, because they were never meant to be part of this next chapter, the chapter where you are no longer a reaction. You are an intention, not a placeholder, a presence. You don't have to say much now, because your energy already speaks. I am not afraid to lose what I no longer beg to keep. And that energy, it doesn't attract attention. It attracts respect. Real love, real friendship, real purpose only finds you once you've made peace with being alone rather than being small. So here's your truth, in case the world made you forget. You are not here to be a sponge for everyone else's comfort. You are not here to play small to be accepted. You are not here to explain your value to people who only listen when you're quiet. You are here to walk tall, even if that means walking alone at first. To speak softly, but with certainty. To say no, not as a shield, but as a way of making space for everything you actually deserve. Because your no isn't rejection. It's the beginning of your real life. And if this part of you feels new, that's okay. It's not new. It's just finally being heard. So let them call you distant. Let them say you've changed. Let them feel the edge of your new shape. Because the truth is, you didn't change. You returned to the person you've always been before the world convinced you to be less.